Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Metlick, and I am here to present to you H.R. 764, the Coastal State Climate Change Act, and discuss the problems it hopes to solve. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this morning, as well as Professor Abson for his guidance this semester, my fellow manager Rachel, as well as my teammates on the Rising Tide. This morning, I will be addressing the following items: the problem, the science behind the problem, the policy looking to address this problem, the science behind that policy, whether or not the policy addresses the problem, future steps, and final conclusions. The problem I'd like to address today is our nation's coastal states and their vulnerabilities to climate change. The United States has a lot of coastline. Referring to this image, 30 states are considered coastal, with 23 states touching the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Gulf of Mexico colored in red, and the 7 Great Lakes states colored green. These states are critical to the country as they contain roughly 80% of the U.S. population and account for nearly 83% of total U.S. GDP. Looking at the image may give the impression that a large chunk of the country is not under threat. However, because of the sheer size of the economy that these coastal states make up, every state will, in one way or another, be affected by the rising threat of coastal damage due to climate change. To get a very clear picture of the kind of nightmare scenario coastal states may be facing over the coming decade, I'd like to focus on California and specifically AT&T Park in San Francisco. AT&T Park is currently the home of the San Francisco Giants and is built so close to the waterfront that they actually have an electronic counter near the right field wall that tallies the number of home runs that make it into the bay. This first image here shows how the coast looks today. This next image shows how it will look with just 5 feet of sea level rise, which is well within the predictions for the end of the 21st century. The park is now inundated and most of the streets nearby are flooded. Taken to the next step, this image shows the area under 12 feet of water. At this point, the park is just one giant pool and every street surrounding the area has been converted into canals. As you can see, the coasts are extremely important for the people living there. The value they add to the economy and the ecological benefits they provide also cannot be understated. The high human population concentration makes it difficult for these states to quickly adapt, and these states, being the front line for encroaching storms, make them most vulnerable for weather-related destruction. Highly fragile ecosystems will likely be damaged and destroyed as saltwater encroaches further inland, and the ecological biodiversity lost because of this will be difficult to ever recover. So, why are these states in trouble? Essentially, as we learned in climatology, the Earth is warming due to our actions and there's no way to avoid it. The climate is changing due to increased greenhouse gas emissions from human activity. One visible result of this is shown here with Los Angeles covered by smog. Smog forms when pollution from cars and factories reacts with sunlight. Though some smog can be caused by natural local conditions, it can be exacerbated by rising temperatures and can create many negative health effects on city residents. There are some controversies over the impacts this will have, including debate over exactly how much the planet will warm and how much the seas will rise. However, at this point, nearly all climate scientists agree that the threat is real and we are causing it. So how are we going to handle the rising tides? H.R. 764 will definitely be a start. Introduced in February of this year by Representative Lois Capps of California, H.R. 764 aims to provide technical and financial assistance to coastal states by providing grant money through the Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker, shown here. The bill hopes to promote the development of voluntary adaptation and response plans. The bill has faced some opposition, notably from those who feel the bill will provide incentives to states already with plans in place to build them out, while providing little incentives to other states who haven't started planning to start now. However, as noted earlier, all 50 states are impacted by coastal state activities, and if just one state's planning mitigates the effects of climate change on its coast, it's likely the benefits will be felt throughout the country. Laid out in H.R. 764 are 3 mechanisms it hopes to implement. Climate change adaptation planning. This bill aims to aid the creation of adaptation plans that protect biodiversity, water quality, and establish habitat buffer zones. This bill also hopes to have coastal adaptation projects. The bill will aims to prevent physical disturbance in coastal zones, will control invasive species, protect wildlife habitats, and mitigate natural disasters. Finally, the bill hopes to promote pilot projects, which will Help will be provided through the bill to promote these projects to ascertain the feasibility and effectiveness of adaptation plans. This image shows the current California Adaptation Planning Guide, which introduced step-by-step processes for local and regional adaptation. This plan is one example of the kind of coastal plans that H.R. 764 could support, and it is crucial that all coastal states develop individual plans to mitigate the effects of climate change on their coasts. Currently, only half of the coastal states have climate adaptation plans, and these are only developed to varying degrees. So how will we protect the coast? There are a number of options available, including natural reconstruction via beach nourishment and wetland restoration, and engineering feats such as storm surge barriers and floodgates. The image shown here is an actual active wetland restoration currently underway just outside of San Francisco. Save the Bay, a regional organization dedicated to protecting San Francisco Bay, is currently committed to restoring 100,000 acres of wetland and habitat in the bay. In addition to protecting coastal cities from floods, wetlands improve water quality by filtering out trash and toxins. In addition, these scientific models can be used to predict future scenarios around the bay and other coastal regions. While H.R. 764 will not address climate change directly, it will help states handle the impacts to their coastlines. H.R. 764 will provide the following: flexibility for regional variability. Climate change will have varying impacts based on local and regional conditions. This allows states to develop plans that are unique to their location. Planning. Storms are getting more and more costly as they become more frequent and stronger. Planning will now likely mitigate future damages to infrastructure as well as reduce cleanup costs. This graph from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration shows the increase in spending on damage caused from extreme weather events. The red line shows the average number of billion-dollar events per year, and the blue line shows the average total cost in billions that these events incur. In the last 2 years alone, the U.S. experienced 25 climate and weather-related disasters totaling $115 billion in damage. H.R. 764 aims to help mitigate and reduce these costs. Finally, the bill will promote monitoring of these plans. Monitoring is essential for the measurement of success of these adaptation plans. Through data, like in this graph, if we see the number and intensity of storms go up, but the total value and damage go down, then we know the bill was a success. In conclusion, H.R. 764 will help us deal with the unavoidable warming climate and the changes that will result from it. Forward thinking promoted by this bill can reduce the impacts of coastal change and potentially save lives, coastal ecological systems, and coastal economies. Coastal states will now have federal help to develop their own unique action plans for their coasts, and which will prepare them for the future. Next semester, we will be looking into the operational plan for the implementation of H.R. 764. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for their time this morning. I'd like to thank again Professor Apson for his tireless guidance, and I'd like to thank my team for all their hard work, and I'm looking forward to our next steps. I will now take any questions you may have.
Great job. I'm a little bit curious about how will climate change cause biodiversity degradation in coastal area. Could you please give us one example to clarify this?
Sure. If the seas do rise up to 5 feet in the next 100 years, that would effectively remove a majority of beaches and coastal wetlands, and with the loss of that would essentially remove all habitat for any species that are native to those regions. So that would significantly reduce biodiversity on the coasts.
But I think the climate change, the sea level rise due to the climate change would be gradually in a very long time. So I think the coastal area, the ecosystem will have the time to adapt to the change.
Well, if there's one thing we learned in ecology this semester, is that climate change is advancing faster than the species can adapt to it. So it might be quite difficult for them to find new habitats over the next century. Of the many things we learned in ecology this semester.